It's January 10th, 1999. We are introduced to an anti-hero, so to speak, Tony Soprano, and we begin to watch his life evolve to menacing, narcissistic, and ruthless character. Now, I've got a theory that bosses today in corporate America are more like Tony Soprano than any real leadership material. Yeah, you heard me right. Tony Soprano, yeah, the mob boss who used fear, manipulation, and a whole lot of bad behavior to keep his crew in line. And you know what? It kind of feels like that's what's happening in offices around the world right now. Let me paint a picture for you. So it's 2024. The workplace has changed so much over the past few years, right? But the one thing that hasn't evolved at the same pace is the leadership style of these so-called bosses. Now, I know not every boss is out there pulling a full Tony Soprano, but listen, it's starting to feel like it. We're talking bosses who rely on intimidation, passive-aggressive emails, and flexing their titles more than their actual ability to lead. They're hoarding power, just like Tony did with his cash, his influence, and his people. And just like Tony's world, everything's about control. Now, let's break this down a bit. Remember how Tony Soprano always had to be the guy in control? He'd manipulate his crew, play them off against each other, and then sit back like some puppet master, all while making you think he was just one of the guys. Sound familiar? I'm betting some of you are nodding along right now, thinking of your own boss. It's like these 2024 bosses are taking notes from Tony's playbook. Instead of empowering their teams or giving them the tools to succeed, they're focused on their own power trips. They want to know every single detail of what's going on, micromanaging everything to the point where no one can make a move without their approval. They'll act like they've got your back, but when push comes to shove, you're left holding the bag. Just like poor Christopher in The Sopranos. I've heard so many stories from friends, co-workers, even listeners of this podcast about how their bosses will tell them they're part of the family. They'll use that line, "We're all in this together," like they're Michael Corleone from The Godfather. But the second things get tough, they're the first to throw you under the bus to protect their own neck. And the worst part, just like Tony Soprano, these bosses often surround themselves with people who will never challenge them. They promote yes men and yes women, folks who nod along, agree with everything they say, and never rock the boat. They create this bubble of security around them. Meanwhile, the people who actually get things done, the ones who think outside the box, who might question a decision here or there, they get sidelined. They don't get promoted. So, why? Because they're a threat to the boss's little empire. And don't even get me started on the gaslighting. Oh man, Tony Soprano was a master of it, wasn't he? But convincing people that they were the problem, not him. Telling people to toughen up or that they're too sensitive when they called out his toxic behavior. Sound like your 2024 boss yet? You bring up a legitimate concern about workload or mental health, and they'll say things like, "Well, I did it when I was your age," or "Maybe you're just not cut out for this." It's straight out of Tony's handbook: deflect, blame others, and maintain the image of control. And just like Tony, these bosses have no clue what's really going on with their people. Remember how disconnected Tony was from the struggles of his own crew? Same thing with a lot of bosses today. They think a pizza party or a casual Friday is going to fix morale, but in reality, they're so far removed from the day-to-day grind that they have no idea how overworked and undervalued their employees feel. Let's talk about decision-making for a sec. Tony Soprano always made decisions based on what would benefit him the most. It wasn't about the greater good, or even what was best for the family, unless it served his interests. Yeah, today's bosses, They're making decisions based on what'll look good on their LinkedIn profile. They're making moves that will get them noticed by upper management or secure their next big promotion without really thinking about the long-term effects on their teams. It's all short-term gain at the expense of the people doing the actual work. So many companies are pushing for productivity and growth at any cost, and the people bearing the brunt of that are the workers, not the higher-ups. It's like Tony sending his guys on a risky job while he sits at home eating gabagool, waiting for the payoff. But here's the kicker, folks. This kind of leadership, if you can even call it that, isn't sustainable. Just like Tony's world eventually crumbled, so will this toxic work culture. People are burning out left and right. Quiet quitting is on the rise. And while these bosses might think they're in control, the reality is that they're losing their best people every day. The ones who stick around, they're either checked out or plotting their escape. You can't lead with fear, manipulation, and ego forever. Leadership is supposed to be about inspiring your team, supporting them, and creating an environment where everyone thrives. But right now, too many bosses are more concerned with looking like they're in charge than actually being good leaders. They're Tony Soprano in a suit, and it's not working. So what's the solution? Well, I don't have all the answers, but I do know one thing. Real leadership isn't about control. It's about trust. It's about collaboration. It's about giving your team the space to grow, make mistakes, and succeed. If you're a boss listening to this, take a hard look at how you're leading. Are you building people up, or are you just flexing your power? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be remembered as the Tony Soprano of your office. Trust me. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you've got any stories about your own experiences with these so-called leaders, to drop them in the comments or send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. And here's to finding real leaders out there, because God knows we need them.